welcome. If you are searching for justice, close this video now. If you are searching for power, stay. I am Niccolò Machiavelli, and I do not speak of the world as it should be, but as it truly is. Kings fall not because they are evil, but because they are weak. Empires rise not through kindness, but through understanding human nature. Men are not loyal by nature. They follow strength, reward success, and abandon failure. A ruler who trusts love alone builds his throne on sand. Power survives through foresight, discipline, and the courage to act when morality hesitates. I do not teach cruelty for pleasure, nor deception for vanity. I teach survival. In a world ruled by ambition, those who refuse to learn its rules become its victims. Understand this. Appearing virtuous is useful. Being virtuous at all costs is dangerous. The wise leader learns when to wear a mask and when to strike with precision. This is not a lesson for the innocent. This is a manual for those who intend to rule. Listen carefully, because what you learn here has shaped princes, presidents, and empires for centuries. Machiavelli's first and most controversial idea is simple but uncomfortable. Reality matters more than ideals. He argues that most political thinkers before him described how rulers should behave in a perfect world. But real power does not operate in a perfect world. States are threatened by enemies, betrayed by allies, and weakened by internal conflict. In such conditions, a ruler who clings blindly to moral ideals risks losing everything. Machiavelli does not reject morality completely. Instead, he refuses to let ideal morality override survival. For him, the primary responsibility of a leader is to preserve the state, because without stability, laws, justice, and morality collapse. Anyway, human nature is at the center of this argument. Machiavelli observes people not as saints, but as they consistently behave. He sees that people are often selfish, fearful, ambitious, and driven by immediate benefit. Loyalty lasts only as long as it is profitable or safe. Gratitude fades quickly when circumstances change. Because of this, a ruler who assumes people will always act morally is preparing for failure. Machiavelli insists that wise leadership begins with accepting these uncomfortable truths, not denying them. From this perspective, idealism becomes dangerous. A ruler who insists on honesty in every situation may be easily deceived by others who do not share the same restraint. A leader who refuses to use force when necessary invites chaos. Machiavelli gives examples from history where leaders were destroyed not because they were cruel, but because they were too trusting or indecisive. He believes that goodness without strength is not virtue, but vulnerability. Reality punishes those who confuse moral intention with effective action. Machiavelli also explains that politics is not judged by intention, but by results. The people do not remember what a ruler meant to do. They remember whether the state was secure, prosperous, and orderly. If a leader's moral purity leads to invasion, civil war, or collapse, history will not praise that morality. In contrast, a leader who takes harsh actions to prevent greater disaster may later be remembered as strong and wise. This does not mean that cruelty should be constant or uncontrolled. Machiavelli repeatedly emphasizes calculation and restraint. Force should be used when it solves a problem permanently, not when it creates endless hatred. Another critical part of this keynote is appearance. Machiavelli understands that people judge with their eyes more than their minds. He advises rulers to appear moral, just, merciful, and religious, because these appearances build trust and legitimacy. However, he warns against being enslaved by those appearances. When reality demands flexibility, a ruler must be willing to act against these virtues, while preserving the image of virtue. This balance between appearance and action is what separates effective leaders from naive ones. Ultimately, Machiavelli's realism is not cynical for its own sake. It is rooted in responsibility. He believes leaders do not have the luxury of moral innocence, because their choices affect entire nations. Ignoring reality does not make it disappear. It simply hands power to those who understand it better. By grounding leadership in how the world truly works, Machiavelli aims to protect states from collapse and rulers from self-destruction. His message is harsh, but clear. Ideals are admirable, yet reality is decisive. And only those who master reality can hope to shape the world rather than be crushed by it. Machiavelli's second key idea revolves around power as a practical tool rather than a moral reward. He rejects the comforting belief that power naturally belongs to the most virtuous or the most deserving. In his view, power goes to those who understand how it works and who are willing to act decisively when moments demand action. Politics is not a court of ethics. It is a battlefield of interests, timing, and perception. A ruler who treats power as something earned purely through goodness misunderstands its nature and places the state at risk. For Machiavelli, effectiveness is the true measure of leadership. Decisions are not judged by how noble they sound, but by whether they secure stability and control. He observes that rulers who hesitate, overthink, or seek universal approval often lose authority. In contrast, leaders who act with clarity and firmness even when their actions are unpopular create a sense of order. People may complain, but they obey. Machiavelli considers obedience more reliable than affection when governing large populations, because emotions change, while structure endures. He also emphasizes that power must be actively maintained. Gaining authority is only the first challenge. Keeping it is far more difficult. Circumstances change, alliances shift, and threats evolve. A ruler who becomes complacent or sentimental quickly loses relevance. Machiavelli praises adaptability, arguing that leaders must adjust their behavior to match the demands of the moment. What works in peace may fail in crisis. What succeeds through kindness may collapse under pressure. Power survives through flexibility, not consistency of virtue. Another important element of this keynote is the role of fear and respect. Machiavelli does not celebrate cruelty, but he recognizes its controlled use as a political instrument. He argues that fear, when regulated and purposeful, is a more dependable foundation for authority than love. Love depends on gratitude, and gratitude fades when self-interest intervenes. Fear, however, is maintained by the expectation of consequences. A ruler who is respected for strength and discipline creates predictability, which discourages rebellion and disorder. The danger lies not in fear itself, but in uncontrolled cruelty that breeds hatred. Hatred destabilizes power, while calculated severity secures it. Machiavelli also discusses the illusion surrounding moral leadership. He notes that people often praise rulers who appear virtuous, even if their success comes from hidden ruthlessness. This reveals a deeper truth about political life. Outcomes matter more than methods. If a ruler brings security, prosperity, and national pride, the public will justify or forget the means used to achieve those results. This does not absolve leaders of responsibility, but it explains why moral judgment in politics follows success rather than intention. At the core of this idea is Machiavelli's belief that power is neutral. It is neither good nor evil by itself. It becomes one or the other depending on how it is used and toward what end. A weak ruler with pure intentions can cause more suffering than a strong ruler who makes hard decisions to preserve order. For Machiavelli, the tragedy of leadership is that ethical purity often conflicts with political survival. Refusing to acknowledge this conflict does not resolve it. It merely ensures failure. True leadership, in his eyes, requires the courage to choose effectiveness over comfort and responsibility over innocence. Machiavelli's third key idea centers on fear, respect, and the fragile nature of human loyalty. He challenges the comforting belief that people remain loyal out of love or gratitude. In his observation of history and human behavior, loyalty is conditional. People support leaders when doing so benefits them or feels safe, but abandon them when circumstances change. Love, while desirable, is unstable because it depends on emotion. Emotion weakens under pressure. Fear, when properly controlled, creates consistency, and consistency is the foundation of order. Machiavelli does not argue that a ruler should seek to be hated. Hatred is dangerous and invites rebellion. Instead, he draws a sharp distinction between fear and hatred. Fear is respect, mixed with consequence. It teaches people that certain lines cannot be crossed. Hatred arises when punishment feels personal, excessive, or unjust. A wise ruler uses discipline to maintain authority without humiliating or needlessly harming the population. This balance allows fear to exist without poisoning the relationship between ruler and people. He also explains why love alone fails as a political strategy. Love depends on promises, favors, and kindness. When times are good, people praise generosity. When times grow difficult, the same people resent sacrifice. A ruler who relies on love becomes trapped, unable to make harsh but necessary decisions without losing support. Machiavelli argues that leadership demands freedom of action. Fear preserves that freedom because it does not collapse when expectations are broken. It rests on predictability rather than affection. Another crucial aspect of this keynote is control over punishment. Machiavelli advises that punishments, when necessary, should be swift, clear, and limited. Long, repeated cruelty breeds resentment and fear of chaos, rather than respect for authority. A single decisive action that restores order is often less damaging than ongoing hesitation, followed by scattered brutality. People tolerate severity when it brings stability. They rebel when it feels endless or arbitrary. The ruler's task is to make discipline appear as a defensive order, not an expression of anger. Machiavelli also observes that people judge rulers more by outcomes than by emotions. If a state remains secure, borders protected, and daily life predictable, most people will accept strict authority. Disorder frightens people more than firm rule. Indecency fear becomes a protective force, not only for the ruler, but for society itself. It deters crime, rebellion, and foreign threats. Love may inspire, but it does not restrain. Fear restrains, and restraint prevents collapse. He further warns that rulers who try to avoid fear entirely often end up feared in the worst way. Weakness invites disorder, and disorder creates suffering. When suffering spreads, people blame the leader. In trying to be gentle, the ruler becomes responsible for chaos. Machiavelli sees this as the ultimate failure of leadership. True authority, in his view, accepts the burden of being firm so the population does not suffer greater harm later. At the heart of this idea is realism about responsibility. Machiavelli does not glorify harshness. He accepts it as a tool that must be used carefully. Leadership is not about being liked, but about maintaining order in an unpredictable world. Respect grounded in controlled fear provides stability where love alone cannot. For Machiavelli, the ruler who understands this truth protects both his power and his people by choosing firmness over fragility. Machiavelli's fourth key idea focuses on foresight, strategy, and the importance of controlling events before they spiral out of reach. He repeatedly warns that fortune favors the prepared, not the hopeful. Many rulers fail not because they lack power, but because they react too late. Problems in politics rarely appear suddenly at full strength. They begin small, subtle, and easy to ignore. A wise leader detects danger early and acts decisively while the cost of action is still low. Waiting for certainty is often the fastest path to disaster. He compares political problems to illnesses. When an illness is recognized early, it is easy to cure, but hard to diagnose. When it becomes obvious, it is easy to diagnose, but difficult or impossible to cure. Machiavelli uses this analogy to explain why reactive leadership is weak. Rulers who wait for public pressure or visible crises lose control over outcomes. By the time action becomes unavoidable, choices are limited and consequences severe. Strategic foresight gives a ruler freedom, while reaction traps them inside events shaped by others. Machiavelli places great emphasis on anticipation. A leader must study history, understand patterns of conflict, and observe human behavior closely. Power is not preserved through strength alone, but through understanding how threats evolve. Enemies test boundaries before attacking. Allies shift loyalty when advantage changes. Internal unrest grows quietly before it explodes. A ruler who sees these movements early can neutralize danger without dramatic force. Strategy, in this sense, is invisible power. Another core element of this keynote is initiative. Machiavelli argues that leaders should shape circumstances rather than be shaped by them. Those who wait for fortune to decide their fate become victims of chance. Those who act boldly force fortune to respond. He acknowledges that luck plays a role in human affairs, but insists that preparation and decisiveness reduce its power. Fortune controls half of human actions, but the other half belongs to those with courage and intelligence. The difference between success and failure often lies in who moves first. He also warns against indecision disguised as caution. Many rulers convince themselves they are being wise by delaying action, seeking more advice, or avoiding risk. Machiavelli sees this as self-deception. In moments of uncertainty, inaction is itself a decision, and often the worst one. Delay allows opponents to organize, rumors to spread, and fear to grow. Authority weakens when leadership appears unsure. Even imperfect action can preserve control better than perfect plans executed too late. Machiavelli further explains that strategy must match the times. A ruler who succeeds through patience may fail when boldness is required. One who wins through aggression may collapse when restraint is needed. Rigid leadership is fragile leadership. The effective ruler adapts tactics to circumstance without abandoning the ultimate goal of stability and control. Flexibility, not stubborn consistency, allows power to survive changing conditions. At its core, this idea teaches that leadership is a continuous act of preparation. Victory belongs not to those who react heroically in crisis, but to those who quietly prevent crises from emerging. Machiavelli respects strength, but he respects foresight even more. The ruler who masters anticipation reduces the need for force and preserves authority through intelligence rather than constant conflict. Power, in this view, is secured long before it is tested, in the unseen decisions made when danger is still only a shadow. Machiavelli's fifth key idea explores the nature of appearances, reputation, and the careful use of image. In leadership, he understands that most people do not experience power directly. They experience it through perception. What a ruler seems to be often matters more than what he truly is. People judge with limited information, guided by symbols, rituals, and public behavior. Because of this, reputation becomes a political weapon. A leader who ignores image allows others to define it for him, often in destructive ways. Machiavelli argues that a ruler must appear virtuous, even when circumstances force him to act otherwise. Mercy, honesty, generosity, and faith inspire trust and calm the population. These qualities create legitimacy, which reduces resistance. However, he warns that rigid commitment to virtue in every situation can destroy authority. When survival of the state is at stake, a ruler must be willing to set aside personal morality. The key is not to abandon virtue publicly, but to preserve its appearance while acting decisively in private. This distinction between appearance and action is not hypocrisy in Machiavelli's view. It is strategy. He believes politics operates on a different plane than private morality. Citizens want stability, safety, and continuity. If those needs are met, they rarely question the hidden methods used to achieve them. History remembers rulers for outcomes, not for the invisible compromises behind them. A leader who secures peace and power will be praised, while one who fails morally and politically will be condemned, regardless of noble intentions. Reputation also shapes how others behave. Allies cooperate with leaders they believe are strong and reliable. Enemies hesitate when they believe a ruler is decisive and unpredictable. Subjects obey more willingly when they believe authority is firm and enduring. These beliefs are created through consistent public image. Machiavelli advises rulers to control symbols of power, public ceremonies, and visible actions, because these elements communicate strength more effectively than explanations or promises. Another important part of this idea is selective generosity. Machiavelli warns against constant generosity, which weakens authority by draining resources and raising expectations. Instead, he advises appearing generous while practicing restraint. Strategic rewards, given at the right moment, build loyalty without creating dependency. Similarly, justice should be visible and impartial, even when harsh decisions are made behind closed doors. People accept severity when they believe it serves order rather than personal interest. Machiavelli also emphasizes the danger of being transparent in all things. Complete openness exposes weakness, indecision, and internal conflict. A ruler who reveals every intention invites manipulation. Mystery, when controlled, enhances authority. It keeps opponents uncertain and supporters attentive. Silence and ambiguity can be as powerful as action when used deliberately. At the heart of this keynote is the understanding that leadership operates through human psychology. People need symbols to believe in, stories to repeat, and images to trust. A ruler who masters appearances does not deceive aimlessly. He guides perception to preserve stability. For Machiavelli, image is not superficial. It is the interface between power and the public. Those who control it shape reality itself, while those who ignore it become prisoners of how others choose to see them in the world. Machiavelli describes, leadership is neither simple nor sentimental. It is a constant struggle between ideals and reality, morality and necessity, appearance and action. Power is fragile, loyalty is fleeting, and fortune favors the prepared. A ruler who clings blindly to virtue risks collapse, while one who understands human nature, anticipates challenges, and acts decisively secures survival. Fear and respect guide behavior. Strategy shapes events before they erupt, and appearances protect authority while actions preserve the state. Leadership is an art of balance, calculation, and courage. Those who seek to rule must accept that the world is not fair, that people are not always loyal, and that mortal comfort is often a luxury leaders cannot afford. The true ruler acts with foresight, adapts to circumstance, and uses every tool reason, force, reputation, and even deception to safeguard the state and endure in history. Machiavelli does not glorify cruelty or manipulation. He simply teaches that power is practical, survival is paramount, and wisdom comes from facing the world as it is, not as we wish it were. In the end, mastery of leadership lies not in being loved or perfect, but in being effective, respected, and remembered. To understand Machiavelli is to understand the timeless laws of power, the delicate dance of human behavior, and the eternal truth that reality will not wait for those who hesitate.